Welcome back to the Bitcoin Zodiac. I hope that you're amazing. Welcome to eclipse season, full-blown eclipse season. Welcome to the lunar eclipse in Pisces, full moon. Very, very exciting. So, as you can see, I'm traveling. I'm at my parents' house in Japan, so I'm not at home, but I will be experiencing the eclipse here, and it'll be so beautiful. And I'm really excited. I love eclipse energy. It is somewhat daunting, I know, but it's also really, really beautiful. So if any of you are sort of feeling like a little hesitant, like what's going to come up, what's coming at me, everything's already been coming at me this year, and I don't know if I can take any more, it's okay. Um, it's okay to feel that way. I know a lot of people are feeling that way, but it's also okay to be excited about the eclipse energy because it always brings transformation. And this one particularly is about this forward trajectory for us. So it's aligned with the North Node and very close to the North Node. So it's really about that directional energy. So um, summon up some courage and let's sort of face what it brings us and move through that because that's where we're meant to be going. Yeah, happy eclipse season. I mean, we talked about it last episode as we entered the shadow period of the eclipse, but we're really at the eclipse now. So very exciting. As I said, it's a lunar eclipse. It's actually near the North Node and it's 15 degrees Pisces. So this lunar eclipse is like the third in the Virgo Pisces series. And so by now you've probably felt kind of the rhythm of the energy. But the first whispers, of course, came in March and last September. They were just subtle ripples of kind of like a hint of the emotional tides. They were kind of quiet nudges that were asking you to look within. However, this time, we're really turning up the volume on the energy of this eclipse. And so this moon in Pisces aligned with the North Node really calls for your attention. So eclipses are just not soft, gradual awakenings. They are turning points. So they pull us out of these like outdated patterns and they really propel us, like sometimes abruptly, but they propel us into the future. And that's what they're here to do. And because this eclipse is like tethered to this North Node, the direction is really clear, and that is forwards. So it's really forward, like into new terrain and into possibilities that maybe feel unfamiliar and maybe even uncomfortable, but they are deeply, deeply aligned with your soul's growth. So very much about propelling you into where we're going. So the invitation here is not really to push harder, but more to surrender, surrender to the energy that this eclipse is bringing. So it's not to strive for action, but it's to witness where life is placing you in alignment. So if discouragement arises, it's not a signal that something is wrong. It's a sign that something deeply right is like emerging from this time period. So this eclipse may well awaken questions in you, not through force or drama, but more through this kind of like soft but persistent whisper. So it's this, it's this whisper of like, is this still true for me? Are the routines, the roles, the responsibilities that I've been carrying, are they still nourishing to my spirit? Or are they simply a habit? Like, do I just do them because I do them? Because this Pisces energy really asks you to dissolve what no longer resonates and like allow yourself to sort of drift toward what does. There's no need to rush into decisions or force clarity. Simply allow awareness to land. So it's not about this like pushing or I need to have everything clear right now. Like Pisces doesn't really give you that. It's more about creating the space for the awareness to land with you. And it's not even necessarily a logical awareness. I was trying to explain this to my parents the other day, actually, about how sometimes when things come to you, like you couldn't explain them to someone else because they don't logically make sense. They're not passing through your logic. It's just something you feel and a direction you need to go in or something that you need to do. And you can't kind of like explain it through logic, but it always makes sense in hindsight. So it's that kind of awareness. And a lot of, we're so conditioned to rely on only our mind. And, everything has to make sense through our mind. Everything has to be explained or justified to someone else. And that's just not the energy that we're in anymore at all. It's really about that, allowing that awareness to land and come to you in whatever way it comes, and be able to follow that with courage, because more and more is going to be coming through like that, because logic has kind of been hijacked in this world. A lot of information can look real and it's not real. And so you have to really become comfortable with this sense of knowing rather than, thinking. And that's only going to become more and more important as we go through this next couple of decades. So definitely a skill that's good to sort of hone now. But you can just sort of like let this awareness of this eclipse really just create space for it, allow it to land, allow it to simmer, and trust that your next aligned step will reveal itself in divine timing. So until then, you can simply just be and know that it will present itself to you. So perhaps this idea, we're sort of halfway through the year, and this idea of finishing the year strong, like, isn't really like the goal. Like, that's not really the goal anymore. It's more, the call is maybe to soften, to slow down, to nurture your body and nurture your heart, and just to become more intentional with your time. Like, something that I've really been leaning into this year is just the ability to romanticize every aspect of my life. Like, I just want to be someone who, no matter where I am, what I'm doing, what position I'm in, I'm able to look for the beauty. Like, that's the first thing that my eyes are drawn to, because I truly believe that beauty will save the world. And I think that it is important to lean into beauty. And so often, beauty again is something that's been hijacked and created to be this sort of superficial, commercialized, over sexualized, overhyped everything, fake, superficial thing. But really, like, beauty is actually an innate human need. It's an innate human desire, and it's something that we should nurture. It's part of being human, is to acknowledge beauty and sort of imbibe of it and thrive in it. And so that's something that I've really been honing this year, is no matter what, I'm looking for those elements of beauty, whether it's um, a flower, whether it's a person, whether it's a poem, whether it's a scent. Um, whether it's food, or just things that are beautiful, and things that bring joy to my sensibilities, like, and that ability to just romanticize life, like be in love with life, be in love with what's going on in life. And often I'm like looking at the markets, like it's very kind of cold and sterile, or dramatic or harsh, and so I'm really, everywhere else in my life, I'm looking for beauty, I'm looking for softness, and I'm looking to lean into that and bring that into my own life and my own spirit. So that's something that's been really, really important to me this year, and that I've really been leaning into. So maybe this also resonates with you, and maybe your strength isn't found in pushing harder, but it's more in surrendering and more into softness. It's more into beauty. And also the acknowledgement of beauty and the cultivation of real beauty. There's nothing really soft about it. Oftentimes, like real beauty is cultivated through hardship, through struggle, through growth, you know? And so, um, if you've already been going through that this year, then maybe this is the time to now sort of like lean into that beauty and that softness, and that's where your strength is going to come from. So maybe the bravest thing that you can do right now is to really be held by life instead of constantly like trying to hold it all together. So this eclipse really marks the start of an inner season that will eventually bring outer change. So think of it as like wild yet soft devotion, this kind of like unfurling from old pressures, and like a release of outdated stories of who you should be. So it's a real rerouting of who you actually are. So the goals that you carry into the end of this year may not look like productivity milestones, but instead they may look like artistry, self-expression, of presence, or like, as I said, just romanticizing life or savoring the peace that you find in ordinary moments. Like maybe these are the goals to strive for towards the end of the year. So as we move through September, just remember that eclipses really bring changes of fate. So they redirect us, and sometimes it's like sometimes it's abruptly, but it's always towards the alignment that our soul has been quietly preparing for. So the work that we've done on our inner self, often without recognition or tangible results, is not wasted. It's really is the foundation. And this eclipse is really a mirror, like reflecting that inner devotion back to you, but in new ways, if that makes sense. So I hope this is resonating with you. It's a little more abstract than my usual downloads that I do for the Bitcoin Zodiac, but it's really a message that's kind of strong on my heart, because I think a lot of the time as we come into the second half of the year and like really start hurtling towards Christmas, is it's very much like finish the year strong. What are your goals? Are you on track? All of this kind of stuff. And I just don't feel that for this year at all. I think that a lot of the harshness, the hardness, the struggle, the striving, that's already kind of come already in the beginning of the year. And so this is now a time to soften and really lean into beauty and yeah, fall in love with your life. So desire has always led you forward, but the deeper truth is this: the ultimate manifestation is really becoming who you came here to be. Like that's the goal. Like everything that you want for your life, really that is the end goal, is becoming who you came here to be. And so that is the real purpose of every eclipse, of every challenge, and every leap forward. And this full moon in Pisces, bathed in this eclipse light, reminds you to soften and to trust and to allow yourself to be carried into the future you that is waiting for you. So, what does this lunar eclipse have in store for Bitcoin? So for those of you that are new here, a full moon is generally, well, is always actually the culmination, the illumination, the ending, and it also brings revelations. It like shines a spotlight. And so in the financial markets and financial astrology, this often coincides with market pivots. It usually prints a local bottom at the full moon. And a lunar eclipse is basically a supercharged full moon. So it often signals shocks, turning points, hidden truths that need to be revealed. So think of eclipses as like cosmic resets that really accelerate timelines. And when they're near the North Node, as this one is, it's very much future orientated. So the North Node always pulls us forward into growth, into new paradigms, and into unfamiliar territory. So unlike South Node eclipses, which tend to be a purging, this one generally brings the emergence of new directions. So at 15 degrees of Pisces, the eclipse energy kind of blends these Pisces themes of dreams, illusions, speculation, collective sentiment, and liquidity with the like fated forward pull of the North Node. So Pisces really rules in financial astrology, speculation and hype. So the dream of what could be. Also liquidity and flow, so like big waves of capital moving in or out. It also can bring confusion or uncertainty, so difficulty discerning the truth from illusion, and also like collective psychology. So this like herd behavior, hype cycles, either extreme fear or extreme euphoria. Um, and when you apply that to the markets, this Pisces energy tends to show up as either over optimism and bubbles or sudden, like fear driven sell offs. So it can also bring rumors, misinformation, and overreaction to sentiment shifts and strong collective emotional reactions. So either FOMO or panic. So Bitcoin is quite sensitive to this kind of Piscean energy. So we could expect some sudden price swings. Eclipses are absolutely notorious for very sharp moves, and Pisces exaggerates this through collective emotions. Be very cautious of narratives and rumors because Pisces definitely can blur reality. So headlines may absolutely cause an overreaction. Sudden inflows or outflows of capital are definitely possible. So whale moves, we've actually already seen some earlier in the week. Kind of exchange glitches or, funds moving off exchanges or unexpected volume spikes. With the North Node involved, this eclipse may also mark the beginning of like a new Bitcoin cycle. So perhaps a change in trend direction or the introduction of new narratives driving adoption. So it's interesting because I have that my feelings on this eclipse are that this is actually going to move us into this final cycle of the bull run. I know a lot of people, previously myself, when I was looking from a long-term perspective, this was definitely a marker that this may be the end of the bull run. But as I said in the last episode, I just don't think that to be true. Too many people are expecting it and are saying kind of like, oh, we're done. And that's just not how a bull run ends in any market. It usually ends with, people being shocked and like not wanting to accept that reality for months at a time. Um, so being like months too late to realize that we're actually are in a bear market. But so I'm not sure that we're there. Also, this involvement of the North Node just really sort of speaks to future projection. So I feel that that's the era that we're coming into with this eclipse. And yeah, so we shall see come March 2026 what that holds. But this isn't a trading channel. We're here to track the evolution of Bitcoin. So there's two sort of separate things that we talk about, Bitcoin's price and Bitcoin itself. And really the purpose of this channel is looking at the trajectory of the secular cycle of Bitcoin as the philosophy and the asset, the decentralized nature of the asset, and really what it stands for and what it is itself. The price is very much tied to the fiat system, and it's how we sort of measure Bitcoin's value, but it's not really a holistic way to measure Bitcoin's value. And really on this channel, we do look at price. It is relevant, but I am more interested in looking at the astrology to track the trajectory of Bitcoin over generations and where that's going rather than the move by move. But of course, we look at the price each moon cycle as well and see where we think that's moving as well, and the positive aspects and the negative aspects as well. But that's really like what my focus is this trajectory of this entirely new way of doing money and how that's moving over the decades. So one of the things with the eclipse as well is that an eclipse is not like a one-day effect. An eclipse energy tends to kind of ripple out over the next 6 months. So as I said, I think this could be the turning point that brings us into this new final move of this bull market. And that's sort of the energy for the next 6 months with this north node involved. That's what I'm looking at from this eclipse. But obviously the kind of volatility and intensity around is like around the exact date of the eclipse is the strongest, but the sort of themes play out and sort of ripple through the next 6 months. So this full moon and lunar eclipse in Pisces near the North Node is really a turning point in collective financial psychology. So we've got a lot of things going on in the world, um, a lot going on in England, a lot going on in America. I mean, I think all of the chaos in England, the civil unrest is purely manufactured. Um, the firing slash resignation of the deputy PM, just a distraction. I think on that day, the pound actually traded 1% lower against the dollar, which is huge. And also the 30-year bond yields are just giving me anxiety, basically. So there's a lot going on in the financial markets, and I think that we are in this collective turning point, and also this turning point in the collective psychology of these sort of old systems not being really fit for purpose. I'm not saying they disappear and collapse immediately. I'm never saying that, on this channel. Everything is a process. But I think that we will see some kind of turning points during this eclipse season, more in the traditional markets. I'm expecting, more in the bond markets and things like that, more than Bitcoin, but Bitcoin is always affected as well, of course, especially the price of Bitcoin. So the eclipse at 15 degrees of Pisces opposes Bitcoin's natal Saturn, which in Virgo. And so that kind of signals like external stress tests and, pivots and market volatility tied to authority systems. So that's where that Saturn influence comes in, because Saturn is structure, regulation, authority, and limits. And so, as I said, kind of like when we're discussing the actual eclipse itself, when you look at this aspect, with the eclipse opposing Bitcoin's natal Saturn, it's external stress tests. So again, I think it's a lot of things happening in the global financial system that will impact Bitcoin rather than from Bitcoin and the Bitcoin community itself. Although I do have some questions that we will cover later regarding Bitcoin reserve companies and things like that, some ambiguity around those things, but we'll talk about that as it relates to some of these aspects that we have coming up. But this particular opposition kind of signals tests and external pressure, restrictions, or restructuring around Bitcoin's role in the financial system. So there's always this kind of like tug of war, this negotiation of how we move forward. But there is, I don't know if you noticed, there is always these few steps back. Like I think everybody wants to see this big sort of explosive kind of move, not just in price, but in adoption, in use cases, in nation state adoption, in the progression of the Bitcoin standard, if you will. But realistically, all these small moves are always moving us forward towards that. So even if it doesn't feel like we're going anywhere fast, there are moves forward being made. So this could correlate with regulatory announcements or institutional integrations or different systemic pressure. So instead of Saturn supporting Bitcoin, this kind of looks like challenges from regulators, institutions, or systemic restraints. So because, but, because Bitcoin, because it's the North Node eclipse, these external pressures are likely pushing Bitcoin forward into greater legitimacy. So even if the short term feels slightly restrictive, this is where we're heading, and this is where these things are pushing us. So markets may initially respond with fear or a bit of contraction, but long term, this can really solidify Bitcoin's legitimacy. I'm briefly interrupting this episode to speak to you about one of our partners, Ritual Supplements, and in particular, Ritual Stress Relief. It's the first of its kind supplement powered by BioSeries technology. Unlike typical stress supplements that fade, Ritual's dual action formula gives you instant calm followed by all-day support. It works with your body's natural cortisol rhythm, helping you respond instead of react, ground instead of spiral. Its unique extended release blend delivers nature's calming adaptogens like ashwagandha and lemon balm when your body actually needs them. That means no crash, no fog, just clarity, focus, and nervous system balance. It's a sigh of relief that keeps going. So if you have spikes in your stress levels or are simply feeling dysregulated, give Ritual Stress Relief a try. Click on the link in the description box to find your perfect daily ritual. Okay, now that we found our Zen, let's get back to the show. We also have the eclipse sextile Bitcoin's natal Mercury and Sun. So they form a close supportive aspect with this eclipse. With Mercury, communication, information, and transactions, and the Sun representing identity and visibility. So this suggests that Bitcoin may gain mainstream attention, narratives or announcements around this eclipse. So expect like increased media buzz and maybe new partnerships or discussions about Bitcoin's role in the future of money systems. So the future-facing North Node energy really amplifies this momentum towards greater adoption and greater mainstream adoption. This eclipse energy with Bitcoin's natal moon, the eclipse is actually within the orb of Bitcoin's natal moon in Aries. So the moon represents collective psychology and investor sentiment, and the Pisces Aries sort of handoff it like represents this emotional volatility, quick reactions, and like herd moves. So big swings in price are likely around this eclipse, with sentiment like very much flipping fast from optimism to fear or vice versa. So to look at the big picture, we look at the eclipse and Bitcoin's natal nodes in Aquarius and Leo. So the eclipse connects harmoniously with Bitcoin's natal north node at 13 degrees in Aquarius. And the north node really symbolizes like destiny and your future trajectory. So Aquarius rules technology, decentralization, and collective movement. So that's exactly Bitcoin's archetype. And so this eclipse may mark like a destined step forward in Bitcoin's larger story of integration into global finance in more of a way. Like obviously the price is very much integrated, and there are a lot of these plays. I've discussed this many times on this channel, that are really designed to give you exposure to Bitcoin, but really keep your value in the current fiat system with ETFs, with the Bitcoin reserve companies. I think, I don't really have an opinion for or against them, because my opinion doesn't make a difference to whether they exist or not. But I choose not to participate in these things because I can very clearly see that they are attempting to make sure that people keep their value in the fiat system rather than self-custodying Bitcoin themselves. So um, when I talk about integration into global finance, we already have that kind of integration, and people are very excited about like this institutional integration, and it's fine. It is what it is, but I think we will begin to see some of this integration in a larger way, from a nation state perspective, possibly from maybe um, smaller nation states adopting a Bitcoin standard or stacking a Bitcoin reserve or investing in mining operations to make use of their excess energy. These sorts of things, these sorts of real world integrations rather than just Wall Street integrations, I think are going to start presenting themselves as we move forward. So new technological adoption cycles and a real narrative shift from fringe to the future. So rather than Bitcoin just being seen as this sort of fringe, geeky asset, is really moving into the future of finance and being seen as that in a collective way. So this Pisces North Node lunar eclipse is really a pivotal moment for Bitcoin. So expect volatility, as with every eclipse, regulatory headlines, and emotional overreactions in the short term. But the alignment with Bitcoin's natal chart really suggests that this eclipse is pushing Bitcoin further into its destined role in the global financial system. So we need to ride out some short-term turbulence for that long-term growth. So after the eclipse energy on the 9th of September, we have a transiting Saturn Quincunx Bitcoin's natal Neptune. So Saturn, which is transiting, brings these reality checks, regulation, cost of capital, risk controls, a kind of like show me the receipts energy. And then we have Bitcoin's natal Neptune, which is like dreams, speculation narratives, liquidity, like things that are hard to value or verify. And the quincunx, it's 150-degree aspect, but it brings like friction by mismatch. So it requires some adjustments, some rebalancing, and some compromises rather than like clean wins or losses, if that makes sense. So we'll be looking at like narrative versus the numbers. So we can expect some kind of like elevated tension between the stories or the narratives which Neptune brings and the like auditable reality that Saturn demands. And so we can expect some like hypey narratives to get compressed, price begin to reflect like harder constraints like regulation or compliance costs or balance sheet realities. And again, I think that we will see this in these Bitcoin reserve companies. So projects like altcoins or tokens or companies with weak fundamentals or kind of like Mercury treasury practices, um, murky strategies, and like or kind of vague roadmaps will underperform in this time. So Bitcoin often holds up pretty well or much better when capital rotates from speculative alts to the kind of quality end of crypto. That's obviously Bitcoin, or even out into cash. Bitcoin tends to hold up obviously much better, but there could be some liquidity friction. So Saturn kind of like dries up Neptune's boundless liquidity. So funding can tighten, leverage being pared back, um, and liquidity thinning at key levels. So expect it to be kind of to see like choppier order books, or stop hunts, and those kind of things, like sudden breakouts around resistance or support levels, just like mainly like more kind of wiki candles and fewer like clean trending candles during this time. So it really is this contrast between opacity and scrutiny. So anything opaque will be questioned. So proof of reserves, stablecoin backing, offshore entities, shadow leverage, those kind of things will definitely be questions. The risk premium is likely to widen. Spreads and basis can move in strange ways as like market makers really demand more compensation to warehouse risk. And so we could see some audit news, regulatory statements, compliance deadlines, exchange and issuer disclosures, those kind of things are very much like Saturn impacted. We can also see like a portfolio rebalancing. It like is like a key word for a quincunx. So the de-risk from illiquid alts, reducing kind of gross leverage, rotating into Bitcoin, stable coins, or cash, or even like high quality layer ones or infrastructure plays, those kind of things. So I expect BTC dominance to go up. We'd expect it to stabilize at least or rise in these kind of windows as the market seeks some refuge, like in the most credible crypto collateral. So um, this is less like in terms of price, it's less like a euphoria like melt up and more kind of like grinding ranges, failed breakouts, and mean reversion, which we've actually already been seeing for a minute, honestly. So the trap risk, I guess, in this aspect is really narrative spikes driven by Neptune, followed by Saturn sponsored reality checks. So expect like bull and bear traps, especially near very key levels that everybody is watching. So directional conviction is definitely harder to maintain during this aspect without being like fully chopped up. So that's just the reality of the time that we're in. The kind of telltale signs as well of this aspect are like sustained cooling, which suggests like leverage is kind of coming out, that Saturn effect again, rising Bitcoin dominance during sell-offs. So quality rotation is very consistent with this aspect. Net outflows from exchanges and stable coin supply changes is like we're watching the liquidity in the market definitely during this time. We're also watching the tone of the news. So from like visionary roadmaps to more audits, compliance, and controls. So maybe sharp reversals on too good to be true headlines. Again, a very much classic quincunx telltales. So looking on chain as well, we expect to see spikes in dormant coin movement or realized losses. These often accompany these adjustment waves, and these are clear signs of the quincunx making its adjustments. This matters specifically to Bitcoin's natal Neptune and Aquarius, because Neptune and Aquarius is the ideal of decentralized, borderless tech money. Which is the dream that animated Bitcoin's birth. So the transiting Saturn, quincunx, forces this like pragmatic accommodation. So the dream must adapt to like rules and audits, capital constraints, and institutional frameworks as well. So price-wise, that tends to translate to like less payoff for pure narrative chasing and better payoff for verifiable risk-aware positioning. So transiting Saturn, quincunx, Bitcoin's natal Neptune really marks a recalibration phase. Narratives are tested, liquidity is constrained, and markets are nudged into quality, transparency, and discipline. So expect it to be choppier. Um, and like a rotation into toward Bitcoin over kind of like high risk alts, and a premium on risk management and patience. So use the window to like upgrade your portfolio quality and shore up security and accumulate strategically on forced dips. So don't chase shiny stories, basically, is the message for this aspect. I'm pausing this episode for just a moment to share with you one of our partners, the Sculpt Society. I'm obsessed with TSS, created by celebrity trainer Megan Roop. It's not just another fitness app, it's the most fun you'll ever have working out. You'll find sculpt, strength, and dance cardio all in one super accessible method that actually works. Whether you have 10 minutes or 50, want low impact sculpting or full body dance cardio, the Sculpt Society has you covered. Inside the app, you'll find over 900 on-demand workouts and weekly live classes, plus curated programs that meet you wherever you are, beginner, advanced, or even pre or postnatal. There's no complicated choreography, no guilt, just movement that makes you feel confident and strong in your own skin. You can stream from any device, anywhere in the world, and even download classes to work out offline. It doesn't matter whether you're in your living room or in a hotel room. So if you've been waiting for a sign to get back into your body and feel good, this is it. Click on the link in the description box and join the Sculpt Society to start your 7-day free trial today. You'll feel the difference after just one class. Let's get back into the episode. Then on September 11th, we have a transiting Uranus square Bitcoin's natal Venus. So Uranus is the planet of shocks, of disruption, of innovation, freedom, and sudden change. And then Venus, Bitcoin's natal Venus, in a financial chart, it represents value, money, attraction of capital, investor appetite, harmony in the markets, and really like what we value. So when it's square, which is a 90-degree aspect, it's a challenging aspect that creates tension, sudden breaks, volatility, and forced adjustments. So Uranus square Venus is sudden disruptions to value, surprise changes in capital flows, volatility on how Bitcoin is priced and perceived as an asset. So we could see some sudden price shocks. Uranus squares typically bring unexpected sharp moves, both rallies or crashes. And with Venus involved, these shocks relate directly to value perception. So Bitcoin's US dollar price could definitely experience some whiplash volatility around these transits. So we could see breakouts that run faster and farther than expected, flash crashes or liquidation cascades, and news shocks that immediately reprice Bitcoin, like exchange announcements, EFT rulings, or like just sudden surprises. We can see some pretty dramatic investor sentiment flips as well. So Venus governs what people like, trust, and what they're willing to pay for, basically. And Uranus shocks can cause like sudden flips in market mood, from euphoria to fear, or from apathy into FOMO. So it's a period where Bitcoin can suddenly be like back in fashion, mainstream buzz, capital inflows, or sharp disappointments that cause risk-off sentiment and some sell-offs, loss of confidence in like these short-term runs. Also, because Uranus rules technology and disruption, we could see some innovation and new narratives. So when like Uranus hits Venus, the value story of Bitcoin can shift suddenly. So we could see institutional adoption news like banks or funds integrating Bitcoin. tech integrations like layer twos, payment rails, global platforms, regulatory shocks like approvals, or taxation rulings, bans or green lights, those sorts of things. So we can expect narrative pivots that quickly move the market. So we've seen this week that MicroStrategy was denied like entry to the acceptance on the S&P. And so those kind of news we can expect during this time, even though it's not really tied to Bitcoin as an asset. They are such huge holders of Bitcoin, and they also act as a proxy to Bitcoin in the fiat markets, that these are the kind of impacts that we can see as well from these kind of aspects. So Venus also like relates to the broader like risk on, risk off trades. So in Uranus, so a Uranus square can really destabilize appetites for all risk assets. So Bitcoin react pretty hard to that as well. So expect like correlation spikes with like tech, with the Nasdaq, and other liquidity sensitive sectors as well. Really, the transiting Uranus square Bitcoin's natal Venus signals a period of sudden shocks, volatility, and narrative pivots around Bitcoin's value. So short term, you can expect sharp rallies and equally sharp reversals. Midterm, market sentiment may flip multiple times. So regulatory or institutional news is likely the trigger. And long term, though disruptive, these Uranus-Venus squares often clear old valuations and usher in like new waves of innovation and capital flows. Then on the 12th of September, we have the Sun sextile Jupiter. So this is a macro aspect, so affects everyone, not just Bitcoin's chart. And so the Sun is really about identity, confidence, visibility, leadership, and market spotlight. Like it's the spotlight. And then we have Jupiter, which is expansion, optimism, opportunity, abundance, and luck. So this is a pretty positive aspect for us. It's a sextile, it's a 60-degree aspect, and it's harmonious, it's supportive. It opens doors, but it requires like conscious engagement to activate. So this aspect creates a window of optimism, growth, and expansive potential. And it's not as dramatic as like a conjunction or a trine, but it's a steady, favorable influence. So we love to see it, right? General optimism increases. We are likely to lean more bullish, willing to take more risks. Liquidity improves, capital flow more easily into risk assets. Narratives expand in a positive way, positive news, upgrades, adoption stories, they kind of start to gain traction. And the market just gets a real confidence boost. So we feel more assured in our strategy and our confidence in the bullishness of the market. So historically, Jupiter aspects correlate with rallies, improve sentiment, and periods of upward price movement. So there is definitely a bullish undertone. And Bitcoin tends to benefit from Jupiter energy. So it's still a risk on sentiment driven asset. Also expect just fresh optimism around Bitcoin's role in the global economy, stories of adoption, regulation breakthroughs, or institutional involvement, nation state adoption, narratives, all of those positive things for Bitcoin moving forward. So we're more likely to be open to allocating to Bitcoin, potentially boosting volume and demand. But it is moderate. It's like this is not a like manic aspect at all. Because it's a sextile, we're not likely to see like super explosive rallies like Jupiter trines or conjunctions, but rather just a steady uplift in confidence, which is great. So yeah, as I said, Bitcoin will probably price-wise as well experience a gradual upward bias or relief rally. Volatility is much lower compared to like Uranus or eclipse periods. So more of a like smooth glide higher rather than this like aggressive move. And also expect some like growth in correlated assets like tech stocks. Um, they often will share the same optimism. So we might see some moves as well, positive moves for the alts as well. Um, although Bitcoin is likely to lead the way as well on the positivity. So the Sun sextile Jupiter is very positive. It's like a very positive, expansive influence that definitely boosts optimism, liquidity, and confidence in the markets. So for Bitcoin, expect a bullish bias, gradual upward momentum, and increased narrative support. It's not a moonshot aspect, but it does create like fertile conditions for steady gains. So the best approach is to lean into the optimism, but don't expect it to be like this parabolic move. Opportunities are there, but they need to be acted upon. So during the Sun sextile Jupiter, the path of least resistance definitely tilts upwards. Bitcoin's price is more likely to stabilize or rise steadily, supported by increased optimism and capital flow. So traders can favor the long side for sure, and investors can accumulate with confidence. And everyone should remain aware that while Jupiter is generous, it can also tempt overconfidence. Then on the 13th of September, we have Mercury Cazimi. So the Mercury Cazimi is in Virgo. And for those of you that are new here, a Mercury Cazimi is when Mercury sits in the heart of the sun. So it's within 1 degree of exact conjunction. So Mercury is purified and empowered. So the symbolism here is really mental clarity, truth being revealed, breakthroughs in communication, fresh insights, and market intelligence. So in Virgo, Mercury's home and exaltation sign, this Cazimi is especially potent, like it's razor sharp analysis, data-driven clarity, discernment, and efficiency. Definitely a clarity of information. The markets will react to news with sharper focus. Misinformation is very easily cut through and seen under this aspect. Announcements really matter at this point. So expect meaningful news, reports or policy statements from central banks, regulations, institutional adoption. These all carry extra weight at this time. So maybe we get hints of a rate cut or some kind of announcements that will point to something positive as we come into that period of the Fed meeting on the 17th, the following week from this. This is a really good time as well for traders because algorithms are really clear, quant strategies are very clear, data-driven methods like very much thrive in this environment. And decisions lean more to analytical than emotional, so it's pretty consistent. So Virgo, which is Mercury's analytical sign, often relates to systems, regulations, and the details. So expect news about regulations, institutional frameworks, or like tax and things like that. This can really boost confidence if it's constructive, or create some volatility if it's restrictive. So, but regardless, it's delivered and received in a very clear, concise way. So we have also data-driven sentiment. Traders at this time will focus very heavily on metrics, so on-chain data, network activity, EFT inflows, adoption reports, fundamentals. They really matter more under Virgo and Mercury. Major institutional announcements may land around this kind of Cazimi window. So for Bitcoin, it's likely short-term clarity and direction setting. And it also could mark a pivot point after confusion or sideways trading through the eclipse. So price may respond quickly and decisively to announcements or market narratives. In terms of opportunities, it is a really strong time for trading based on news flow, and a good window for reviewing your strategies, refining your systems, and analyzing your portfolio. But if you've been unclear about Bitcoin's direction, this Cazimi is likely to bring you sharper insight. So there are risks, like Virgo Mercury can be overcritical. So there's a risk of overanalyzing, leading, overanalysis leading to paralysis. The market could swing sharply on news headlines, even if the fundamentals haven't really shifted, because this is more about information driven. Beware of thinking short-term clarity is the same as long-term certainty. So Kazimis open up the channel of truth, but the market still digests the shifts afterwards. So the Mercury Cazimi brings a rare moment of financial clarity, precision, and thoughtful insight. So expect dramatic reactions to the news, regulatory clarity, or institutional announcements. Bitcoin could experience a decisive move out of stagnation, either confirming bullish momentum or correcting unsustainable narratives. So the Mercury Cazimi in Virgo is like a cosmic market analyst stepping in, and it cuts through the noise. It really highlights truth and sharpens strategy. So for Bitcoin, it suggests a short-term pivot in price direction, heavily influenced by news and data. Investors should focus on clarity, organization, and alignment, while traders can benefit from decisive moves and sharper signals. Then on September 19th, we have a transiting Saturn semi-square Bitcoin's natal ascendant. So again, Saturn brings the discipline, the restriction, the testing, the reality checks, the slowing of growth. And the ascendant is the identity, how something presents itself in the world, the face of Bitcoin, the public image, public perception, branding, and when it's semi-square, it's a 45-degree angle, so it's a minor but tense aspect. It represents friction, delays, and the need for adjustment. So Saturn is applying pressure on Bitcoin's outward identity and how it is perceived by the market. So it's not a collapse signal for sure, but it does suggest like a bit of a stress test or a hurdle, some external challenges to Bitcoin's image. We could see like it's slower growth or a corrective period here, regulatory or institutional pressures, sort of a muted optimism. We had that optimism previously from the previous aspects, the Friday, on the Friday, and then coming into the new week, we have this sort of muted optimism, where we may want to take a more cautious stance. Volatility does contract as the liquidity tightens as well. So this semi-square is, the tension is subtle, but it is persistent. It's kind of like background noise. So it doesn't like trigger any extreme shocks, but it does sort of just slow that. It creates like a headwind, if that makes sense. So Saturn is really pressing Bitcoin's ascendant, and that can show up as skepticism, maybe from banks, regulation, governments, anything that's kind of ruled by that Saturn energy. So maybe news around regulation, compliance, those kind of restrictions. And it's like a public image test. So the market may question Bitcoin's role, store of value versus payment system, speculation versus legitimacy, and legacy. So headlines may skew a little critical, and Bitcoin may face like sluggish upward momentum corrections or sideways consolidation. So Saturn kind of slows growth rather than triggering sudden drops like, say, Uranus would, right? So again, with Saturn, it's always about the institutional, governmental kind of lens. So larger players may hesitate to commit more capital until the dust clears around regulations or policies. Again, I'm kind of reading that also around regulation and decisions around these Bitcoin reserve companies. Over 1% of Bitcoin's supply is actually held now across these top 100 Bitcoin reserve companies. So it's quite an interesting play. And they have really received quite a smooth, I mean, after MicroStrategy did all the hard work, all of these other companies that have followed have gotten quite a smooth entry into the traditional fiat system. And it does feel like there's a bit of brakes being put on that a little bit, and them a little facing a bit more scrutiny than they have previously. So I can see that sort of being happening under this aspect. The Saturn square, semi-square Bitcoin's ascendant really signals a period of like image stress, slower growth, and external pressures. So expect like headwinds in public perception, regulatory narratives, and slower upward movement in price. So this is not a collapse signal. It's just more of a like stress test phase. And so consolidation, grind, maturation, that kind of thing. Traders should expect maybe tighter ranges and slower moves, while long-term investors should really lean into just patience, discipline, and accumulation strategies. So this Saturn aspect isn't dramatic, but it is important. It really tests Bitcoin's resilience and reputation. So expect grind, not a moonshot, but definitely remember Saturn delays, but it doesn't deny. So those who stay disciplined through this period are more likely to benefit when the restrictions eventually ease. That then takes us into our solar eclipse. So new moon and solar eclipse in Virgo. It's a south node eclipse. And so the new moon is like seeds of new beginnings and a time for like intentions and setting the tone for the coming lunar cycle. So a solar eclipse amplifies that energy of the new moon. It does bring sudden shifts, accelerations, or endings. So it's a catalyst for change rather than a gradual evolution. So the South Node represents the past, habits, and patterns that are ready to be released. So it's more of a purging energy. The eclipse is at the very anaretic degree, so the very last degree, it's at 29 degrees. So this is really signaling the culmination and the closure of old cycles. So this eclipse is about releasing outdated structures, routines, or systems in finance and markets to make space for new forms of growth. It's going to be a focus on efficiency and fundamentals. So we've got that Virgo energy really favors scrutiny, analysis, and practical results. And markets will react to clarity, audits, performance data, and operational precision. Definitely a correction of excesses. So over leverage positions, speculative excesses, or weak infrastructure are likely to be exposed here. So it is also that new moon energy. So it can bring a downward movement and create a local top, like pump into the new moon and then like dump out of it, creating that local top in the market. So if you do have any over leverage positions, speculative excess in the market, or weak infrastructure, that's likely to be exposed here. So expect some consolidation or pullbacks in risk assets. Also, information-driven moves, so news reports or systemic updates may trigger like notable market reactions. It's interesting because sandwiched in between these two eclipses, um, more towards this eclipse actually, like on the 17th, is the Fed meeting where they are expected to reduce rates by at least 25 basis points. And so it'll be interesting if we get any surprise moves out of that meeting and coming into this eclipse, because 25 basis points is probably already priced in. But if they do something unexpected, like maybe 50 basis points, although I do believe that this is positive for Bitcoin, positive for liquidity, it does signal that something is very, very wrong in the markets. And my personal opinion, anyway, is that the Federal Reserve just even entertaining the idea that they are going to reduce rates even by 25 basis points, while the stock market and asset prices are at all-time highs, already indicates a loss of control and something very, very wrong. And obviously, the very, very wrong is presenting in the labor markets, but it's very unprecedented for the Federal Reserve to be reducing rates while asset prices are at all-time high, to need to stimulate the economy in that way, and obviously expose themselves to inflation risk. But I don't think they have any choice because the labor market is in such a bad space. So it'll be interesting to see what coming into this eclipse. But if there is something very dramatic out of that meeting, we could see quite a dramatic spike down for all assets, including Bitcoin. But I think the Bitcoin will recover quite quickly. But the eclipse may be the period that we see that real move down. So just be aware of that. So again, with any eclipse, short-term volatility is really likely, possibly testing lower support levels, shaking out weak positions, etc. This eclipse can act as a pivot point for Bitcoin. So where inefficiencies or outdated patterns are very much cleared, making way for more sustainable upward movement later on, as I said. So long-term evolution, by releasing the old, Bitcoin is positioned to adopt stronger structural foundations and attract disciplined capital and consolidate legitimacy. So during eclipses, emotions and decisions are often very much heightened and accelerated. So expect like quick reactions to news events. Traders to overreact to data, heightened volatility in such short windows. And South Node eclipses really favor reflection and closure rather than initiating brand new directions. So the new direction came from that North Node in Pisces, and that was more future focused and more expansive. This is more the purging to allow that energy to really flow through. We see a culmination, a clearing, and a refinement of energy, a reset on inefficiencies and outdated patterns. And then short-term effect on Bitcoin, as I said, volatility, testing of support, shaking out of weak hands. And long-term, we see stronger structural foundations, disciplined capital accumulation, and the path towards sustainable growth. So the eclipse acts as like a release and recalibration point, and Bitcoin and markets may move a bit unpredictably in the short term. That's usually an understatement, but this is really preparing the system for more aligned future-focused growth that the North Node presented in the previous eclipse, this eclipse that's happening right now on the 7th. So this new moon and solar eclipse in Virgo at the South Node is a powerful market cleanse. It emphasizes like releasing outdated structures, inefficiencies, and speculative habits in Bitcoin. So again, short-term volatility may feel uncomfortable, but it really prepares the market for a stronger, more sustainable trajectory as we approach the North Node Piscean energy. So that is all I have for you. I will see you for the new moon solar eclipse in a couple of weeks. Until then, peace, love, and Bitcoin.